Bang! Neves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife, Kara's busy. And today we are talking about the best flipper knives. Flipper meaning flipper tab back here. And what creates a good flipper is having a good detent system. The detent is that little ball you see right there at the top of my finger. I will zoom in. And having a good detent system coupled with a good flipper tab, and depending on the type of bearings or system you have in the pivot, depends on how good of a flipper a knife can be. This is the Zero Tolerance 0450, which is an amazing flipper. Zero Tolerance just makes great flippers, period, and their detent systems are down pat. This has ball bearing pivot, which makes it an amazing flipper. Next, the Kizer Clutch. Don't forget, we have a 10% discount on all Kizers coming from Amazon. I will link that discount code below in the description. This is the Kizer Clutch. And Kizers also do great detent systems. Now, in this category of knives, I wanted to make a good mix between budget knives and high-end knives. It was really hard to narrow it down to this list because I had probably 30 knives picked out, all with amazing flipper action. But this coupled with the lock bar access, the reverse detent, because that's another thing. You know, if you got to fumble with the detent when closing it, it can't be an amazing flipper. You want to be able to close it very smoothly. The detent should have a great break, and the Kizer Clutch is an amazing flipper. It does have ceramic ball bearings with a ceramic detent, S35VN, micarta, and titanium. Now, talking about Kizer, you can't talk about Kizer without talking about one of their budget knives. They have so many amazing budget knives. The Kizer Lieb is one of the crispest detents I've ever felt, especially on a budget knife. You can hear the detent, how clicky it is. It's so clicky. Micarta N690 blade steel. It's a little 3-finger knife, but man, has it got a good flipper action. You wouldn't think that a little knife like this could flip as good as it does. Great little knife. Here is the Tuya Bruiser. Tuya, they do amazing flippers on high-end and budget knives. This is one of their budget knives, but man, is it a good flipper. This thing is only like 42 bucks, D2, great access to the lock bar, passes the detent, because when you unlock a lock bar, you hit the detent ball if you don't push the lock bar over far enough. But when you do, either you're fumbling around right there on the detent ball trying to close it and you got to push past it, but a good flipper will go right past it, hit your finger, and then let you close it all the way. Tuya Bruiser. Next up, Kershaw Atmos, which is a relative to ZT, Zero Tolerance. They are the same company, and man, this thing is super snappy, especially for a liner lock. Now, this one does tend to hit the detent ball, but you can go past it. It's not a problem, but for the price, it's super duper lightweight, and this one kind of is cool to hit the detent ball. You can get past it without a problem, but I kind of like actually hitting the detent ball. There's not many knives I do like doing that with, but just where the lock bar and flipper tab is located, it just works out to be very fidgety. Kershaw Atmos. Another amazing budget knife flipper, the Ganzo FH11, FH12, and FH13. This happens to be the 12, which is the all stainless steel. The 11 we also have, which is in G10, but super smooth. These are on ceramic ball bearings. They might be steel ball bearings, but I think they're ceramic. But either way, it is 100% fall shut action. The detent is so crisp. It's very hard to fail. And even though it's so drop shutty, it is locked up rock solid. The access to the lock bar is very nice. Now, this is not titanium. This is all steel in D2. But man, is it a great flipper for only like 25, 30 bucks. This thing is a guillotine. Now, you can't talk about great flippers, especially even in the budget, without talking about Civivi. Civivi Praxis. Now, this thing, Civivi and WE Knives, they just have their detents down pat. I mean, they are so crisp, so easy to manipulate. Lock bar access is super easy, very slicey. Great, great price for these knives. And yeah, these things are hard to beat. Just a great full-size knife. And the flipping action is so nice. Now, still speaking of Civivi, let's talk about the Civivi Elementum. The Civivi Elementum is such a cool little flipper. I put little quick thumb studs on these that somebody sent me, and so I got that. But none in this category has anything to do with any other action except for the flipper. I was even gonna put some front flippers in here, but you can't do it. It's not an actual regular flipper. That's a front flipper, so it can't count in this list. But a lot of people know about the Civivi Elementum, and yeah, just very easy to manipulate, open and close. Now, talking about some higher end Civivis, which would be WE Knives, the WE Kitefin. This thing, not only is it a super slicer, the detent is so crisp. When it breaks, it flies open. And it's very easy to manipulate, very easy to open up. Just like all of these knives on this list. I'll tell you what, the top three were very, very hard to figure out. Because even though the first, let's say all the way up until the top three, top four, they are not in no particular order. But I wanted to make sure the top four, possibly top five, were the best on this list. Another WE knife, the WE Vapor. Just such a crisp detent. They make, man, amazing, amazing action. Between these two, it's very hard to say which one is better, because they are both such crisp action. This one's more drop shutty. This one's such a light blade. It's not drop shutty. You'd have to slap it shut. The pivot is a very tight pivot. But I would say the Kitefin is just a little bit better. This one snaps out a little bit harder, I think. Possibly. Maybe not. But this one closes a lot more easily. Next. Since we were talking about budget knives, let's go back to another budget knife. The Bestech Warwolf. Man, this thing flies. This flipper tab is just shaped so good for a perfect break. I even had a custom knife guy check this thing out, and he was amazed with how great this thing flips. Perfectly centered. Just a great break on the detent. The access to the lock bar is very easy. Super smooth with its ceramic bearings. Just a great, great knife. Now let's go into a little bit higher end knife. The Bestech Goblin. This thing has a super crispy detent as well. It's a smaller knife, but that doesn't stop it from being an amazing little flipper. Last one, and then we're on to the big leagues. Let me just say this really quick. I have a bunch of knives out there that could possibly also be on this list, but since I do not have them in my possession, I can't put them in this video. Those are the rules for this video. I have to have them in my possession. And this is the Tucson TS 158, I think it is. It's a little tiny flipper, but it just flips so good. Tucson does great work with their flipper knives. Well, all their action on their knives is amazing. I can even middle finger flick this knife, but that's not what this is about. This one has internal stop pin, so it's nice and strong, very locked up, but this is a very tiny knife. So this might not be everybody's type of flipper, but for such a little knife, man, this thing's a little pocket razor, only 10 thousandths behind the edge. All right, now we're stepping into the big leagues. Quest Custom Gent. You guys have seen this on my channel before. The flipper tab is just so good. Access to lock bar, amazing. What an awesome flipper. It's the detent is heavy, but the placement of the flipper tab, you have to you really have to break that detent, but it's not uncomfortable whatsoever. Once you break the detent, the weight of the blade takes over and really flies out. Super drop shutty, very smooth. Quest Custom Gent. Next, the CRK, which is the CRK, the Custom Knife Factory Recenti Snafu 2.0. This thing's action is insane. Yes, you can use the fuller, you can use the thumb studs, which also is the stop pin, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this flipper tab. Gives you a nice placement right here, and then you can light switch it, you can push button it. That was the push button before. You can light switch it, you can do it any way, and it just flies out. This one's kind of like the other one where once you break that detent, like I tried to fail it there. Once you break that detent, it's like the blade just takes over. It's so easy to manipulate the lock bar, very easy to access, but you want to be careful because that blade falls like a guillotine. Super drop shutty. Next up, we were talking about the Tuyas before, right? Tuya Envy 2. This thing it feels like a way more expensive knife than it is. And it's not cheap, but $220. But $220. That's my fault. I keep doing that. But the flipper tab, super crisp, very nice. Access to lock bar is nice. It's easy to get past the detent. I know I was fumbling it there in the beginning, but that was 100% my fault. The detent and flipper tab are so well tuned on this thing. You would think this is a way more expensive knife. Like I said, access to lock bar is very nice. Super smooth titanium M390. It is a very thin hollow ground. They call it a drop point. It's more of a straight back, but it has a combo grind. And yeah, super comfortable in the hand. This thing could have went into my ergos video because it has amazing ergos as well with the palm swell and everything. I don't know why I didn't put this in that video. Amazing knife. Tuya Envy 2. All right, these last ones are very tough. Very, very tough. All right. Ooh, I don't know which one to go with. All right, I'm going to try to do these in order. The Shuro Goroff Haitian, Hatian, whatever you want to call it. What an amazing knife. The flipper tab is super small, but so crisp. The detent it works so good. It's so drop shutty. The blade is super light, nice and thin behind the edge. Access to the lock bar is really easy. It's always past the detent ball, and it just falls right into place. It's so easy to manipulate this knife, even with this little tiny flipper tab. You can like lay your finger on top the flipper tab and just like use like the pad of your finger to flip it. I got a band-aid on that finger. So you can like put it like that and just go like that, and it works very easily. Or you can grab it like this and just yank down, and it also works incredibly well. And it is on multi-row bearings. So those multi-row bearings, whew, they really make it drop. Man, this is an incredible knife. Next up, the React K2. And thanks to the man in the shadows, he is letting me keep this amazing, amazing flipper. The flipper tab, it's not small flipper tab. It's a medium to large size flipper tab. But the way the detent and the bearing system just works, whoo! This thing has incredible action. You could flip this all day and not get sick of it. It's like when you walk past it and you see it, it just makes you want to flip it. And the ergos are so good. The blade geometry is so good. This is an incredible, incredible knife. Blade to handle ratio, you can see that. Yeah, the detent. And then the access to the lock bar is really nice. It's always past the detent. It basically falls on its own weight. And once you break that detent, it's like I'm trying to like fail it right now. I guess you can fail it if you really want to, but it's hard because the blade just takes over. Not one of these knives do you need any wrist for whatsoever. Next up, this one is one of the best flippers I've tried, and I just did a review on it. The Arno Bernard Orca. It did have one big problem with it, but we won't talk about that in this video. If you want to know about it, you can go watch the review. But this thing's action, the flipper tab is super jimped, so it's very catchy. It catches on you very easily. It's like, in the detent, man, oh, this thing's detent and the detent break is so crisp. It's so good. I mean, it is amazing. It's almost a false shut action, but you really don't even need to like go up here with the flipper tab. You can literally grab it from any position because it's so grippy. And you have the reverse flick and all that, but man, that flipper tab really works so good. All right. It was hard for me to pick between that one and the Shirogorov F3R, because both of them have amazing action. But this one, I feel like, is just a little bit better. Super false shutty. The flipper tab is a little bit like this one, but not quite. And man, both of them just work so good. It's very hard to say which one has a better flipper because they're both just so good. Access to the lock bar is so good, so perfect. As soon as you unlock it, it just drops. I meant to let the flipper tab hit my finger on that one, but that just shows you how false shutty it is. You can, like I said, no wrist, no nothing, super crisp. You can never get sick of flipping a knife like this because it doesn't give you any type of flipper fatigue or anything like that. It's just so amazing. Now, I guess this one would be the best. I was trying to figure out between these two which one was the best, because the Holt Spectre is an amazing flipper. Now, this one does not work on a detent ball. This one works on a detent nub, as you can see. Now, a detent ball looks like that. Looks like that ball right there. This one has a nub right there. But They're so close together. I wouldn't even say 1 and 2. I would just say they both get number 1. But this one has something a little special because it has that detent nub. It just makes it kick. You can hear the difference. And this one, when you unlock it, there's no detent ball to go over. So it's always past the detent, because once you unlock it, in order to unlock it, it has to go over that detent nub. So it's always past the detent. And that is why I pretty much put this one at number 1, was because of that. Now, like I said, there's so many knives I could have put on this list. So many. This thing is an amazing, amazing flipper. Very hard to pick between these two because they're such good action. But because of the detent nub and it being a little more unique, I had to give it to this one. Whew. Man, these two knives are amazing. Love you guys. Peace.